I'm somebody that's very interested in the atheism versus theism or religion debate. I prefer actually to watch it from the sidelines, although I more often than not find myself cheering for the atheistic side. But I'm not above pointing out certain interesting inconsistencies or perhaps problematic arguments that they tend to make. There is a strain of moral indignation in a lot of the atheistic points of view. Generally it goes along the lines of, well, the God of the Bible is immoral, or if God exists and he's a loving creator God, then why do so many bad things happen in the world? That sort of thing. Now, I actually don't believe that belongs in a debate of whether or not God exists, because what God does doesn't really prove whether or not he exists. I just say, you can no more say that because God is immoral, God does not exist, than you can say because of Adolf Hitler, human beings don't exist. That's not really a rational argument, not really a logical argument to make. Having said that, I'm fairly anti-clerical myself, and I can actually say that I distrust religion because they are espousing the idea that I should venerate a God that may not actually deserve to be venerated. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with whether or not God exists, but it has a lot to do with whether or not I'm willing to listen to these clerical types telling me what I should believe. But that's not atheism. That's a completely different subject, if you ask me. Now, this doesn't mean that this subject shouldn't be explored. And it leads off into interesting points of view, interesting branches. Something that seems to be on the rise in Mexico these days, and in the Mexican diaspora, is the cult of the Santísima Muerte, the holiest death, Saint Death. I think that a lot of people are familiar with the cult, and it does seem to be growing at a rate that has caught a lot of people's attention. Now, what has this got to do with a debate on atheism? Well, in a certain way, I think that the devotees of La Santísima Muerte have a fair amount in common with people who object to God on moral grounds. They're not really leaving the Catholic Church, but they're branching off into a sort of apostasy or perhaps heretical type of Catholicism, which actually still is in very much in the Catholic tradition, of a type of a view of God or the universe that isn't necessarily 100%, shall we say, traditional Christian, but it's very much in the neo-pagan, Neoplatonic traditions of the Catholic Church. Now, an atheist, or a lot of atheists, have said that they don't respect religion or they don't believe in God because God is immoral, therefore they've dropped the whole thing. Now, I would put the argument forth that a lot of people who venerate La Santísima Muerte, along with people who venerate other gods of that ilk, one would call them dark gods or dark saints or whatever, such as Kali in India, any number of sub-Saharan African deities, they've actually dropped traditional religion or the conventional religion for a different kind of religion with a different focus. For the same reasons that a lot of people in the West have turned their backs on religion completely. Now, a Mexican, especially a Mexican that inhabits the inner city of any large Mexican city, doesn't have to be told on an intellectual level that the world is not a nice place, that life is not fair, that the good doesn't always win. The evidence is right before their very eyes. They don't need the stimulation of watching Apocalypse Now or 2012 or any number of these strangely gory movies that Westerners are so fascinated by to know that life can be brutal, cruel, unfair, and harsh. But you see, this has actually led them in a different direction than atheism. The Latin American mind, especially the Mexican mind, one could say certain other countries, certain other cultures like the Arab mind, they tend to think metaphysically. Poetry, rhetoric, flowery words, philosophical thinking tends to mean a lot more to them than sitting down and discussing something dryly. So when they look at all the bad things in the world, they cope with it in a different way. They say, or I presume, they would sort of think, the best thing that we can actually do with the fact that the world is not a nice place, that the forces that potentially could rise up and destroy me are forces that I can't really control or contend with. They seem to think the best thing to do is to come to terms with it, to sort of cope with it, instead of pretending that it's not there. Or I shouldn't say pretending that it's not there, but saying that I don't believe that that there are any forces out there at all. That is just alien to the Mexican or like I say, to the Arab mind. It just seems to be bizarre that anyone should just sort of say we live in a dry, logical place. That's just not the way their minds work. So they would say, or I presume that they would say, again, this is just my take on this, that the best thing to do is to embrace the horrors of the world. And this is a difficult thing for the Western mind, still with its powerful streak of moralism and Victorianism, I would say, to come to terms with. Well, when there's bad things in the world, you overcome them, you defeat them. Well, we also know that the world will always be riddled with problems and bad things. We know this. We know that the world will not be perfected. But still, we do believe that one must always try. Now, the other tradition in human life is you have to accept and cope with the evil in the world. And again, the devotees of these somewhat, to our minds at least, dark cults, dark faiths, have gone a little bit further. One could even include Satanism in this, even though I'm not saying that Kali worship or the veneration of La Santísima Muerte is satanic. I don't believe that, although I can see the similarities. They will say, not only do you have to cope with it, you have to embrace it. You have to accept the fact that that's inherent in this world. Evil, bad things, darkness, and that it is just part of life. And because it's a part of creation, it must be, in some weird way that we can't understand, it must actually be good. Because everything in this universe is a creation of God. Therefore, whatever God does is good. Therefore, sanctity and shit are all good. We have to cope with them. We have to love them. We have to accept them and embrace them. Now, I'm not saying that all people who venerate La Santísima Muerte or Kali or any of these sorts of splinter faiths, I guess we'd call them, actually intellectualize to that point of view. But what I do think, what I do like to wonder, question is, why is it that they choose these frightening images? These, like, the Santísima Muerte is this skeleton dressed as the Virgin Mary. Kali, well, we all know what Kali looks like. She's got a garland of human heads. She's ferocious, covered in blood, and this kind of thing. Why do they choose these ones? They say that we love this frightening image. Why not just run to this wonderful, benevolent shepherd? Because that's another... Jesus Christ. That's another objection that comes up when people sort of criticize the religious. They say, well, you're just running away from the evil of the world into the arms of this lovely sop called religion. Well, okay, but there are other people who actually take exactly the opposite point of view. They run to the frightening things. They run to the frightening aspects, the cruel aspects of life, or that which represents them, and they venerate them. As I say, it's an interesting point of view, and I think that the atheists who negate religion or who refuse to accept God on moral grounds have a lot more in common with people like those who venerate La Santísima Muerte than they like to think. Just an opinion. Thank you.